We have people from like YC and Techstars and whatnot all reaching out. They already know us. How do you know who we are? Like, I'm shocked. And one of the reasons is the team that we put together has hung out and been at other events. If I haven't met them, they've met someone of mine. They already understand that we are at a higher level just because you keep these people together.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Ocel, VP of Innovation at This.Labs, here for another episode of the Leadership Exchange. Today, I'm here with Ivan Burazin, who's the co-founder and CEO at Daytona. Ivan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we have such an exciting topic we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about team building and kind of what you need to know at basically any level of company or business. But before we get into that, just as a way of introduction, can you kind of let us know a little bit about how you got to this position with Daytona, kind of what they are, and like what your experience has been that's gotten you to this point?
I mean, in general, I've always sort of either worked on my own, like a single person type thing, or have started companies, not necessarily startups in the sort of like tech scene in the sense of a startup. I have done a few, but like done things all over the place. And I just keep falling into it. For the most part, it's almost always been around developers, developer tool infrastructure. I have also had a career in event organizing, like literally conferences of like thousands of people, which was for developers again. So it wasn't like something on the side. So my entire career has been in this direction. And oddly enough, which is probably we're going to touch in a bit today, is that the co-founding team of Daytona and I have co-founded multiple things together. And so we've almost been, like married and divorced and married and divorced. Again, it's like soulmates almost, right? It's one you keep coming back to. So yeah. And earlier, not last year, but year before last, we started Daytona with a slightly different idea. But what we're doing right now is we are providing agents with computers. So if an agent needs a place to analyze data, clone a GitHub repository, use a visual interface like a desktop, run a browser, or anything like that. Essentially, if you think of like what a MacBook is to a human, that is what we do for agents. Obviously, there's some nuances to that. It's not exactly one-to-one, but that is what we do at Daytona.
I love it. How quickly we've developed these agents are just truly people now, that we've now building a WeWork for agents. And great. Okay, cool. I mean, also, it would be silly of me to not maybe mention this. I know you've done extensive work on both sides of the pond. So do you have any thoughts on the difference in the two engineering cultures between sort of the European one and the American one?
Sure. I think it's quite different. So I spent a lot of my life in Eastern Europe, but also like in North America as well, about half and half between both. And what I can say about Eastern Europe is that they have such a high quality of smart and talented engineers that it's very hard. Like, people don't know about that a lot. People talk about other places in the world, which are great as well, but very few talk about this part of the world. And I say this part of the world because it's very broken up into smaller countries. So like Croatia is the one I was in, but you have like Croatia, Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, whatever. You have a bunch of these countries, and they're all small ecosystems. So maybe that's why people don't think about that a lot. The thing that is lacking in Eastern Europe is the ability and capability to sell. And when I say sell, it's everything from like literally sales to marketing to branding to communication to all these things. It's something that is not ingrained in the culture at all. So if you like things that you see, like even engineers do in Western societies, where it's like, oh, let's have like a technical blog and we're going to write about the thing that we do. People in Eastern Europe just don't want to do. Like, it's like, I want to build a thing, done, like nothing else. And so you're missing this whole spectrum of things. And I'm sure, and that's what you get much more in Western societies. And I'm not saying that Westerners are better or worse for those things, right, but those things are certainly a talent and a skill that you do need in any company, right? And so people in Eastern Europe in general lack that, but I'm sure they make it up in different things. But if you need someone to do these things, it's not the place to search for. So if you're looking for like a, DevRel people, probably not the place to find them. There are several people in Eastern Europe, not goes without saying, but I'm sure you'll find people that are more tuned to writing content and standing on stage while being technical in different parts of the world.
Yeah, so the whole industry moved to remote work too, and I thought people were going to finally figure out something which we've discovered at this dot, which is we hire internationally. And it's sometimes hard to tell people like, oh yeah, we have a engineer in Croatia, and they say, oh, right, this is like your offshoring model. And we said, no. We go hire the best engineers around the world. And there is a tremendous amount of undertapped talent in these areas that are traditionally thought as like offshoring or nearshoring places. And I think when we went to a remote work environment, I thought people were going to start doing that, but instead we just snapped right back to in office. We don't have to talk about the merits of that decision, but I think it remains the case that there is an undertapped talent pool at the senior level in Eastern Europe, especially that would surprise people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I get that a lot, especially since like a lot of our company right now is all from Croatia because I've lived there for a long time, know a lot of people and whatnot. And it's always like, oh, are not the best engineers in X city. And X can be any city which that person lives in that they're commenting on. And I'm sure there are, but like there are great people absolutely everywhere. And to your point, there is a lot of like offshoring, and then people are like, oh, you're doing that for the price or that you can get people for. But I actually think what I actually think about is one, it's really hard as a foreigner in any remote location to get the best people at a realistic price that's locally. So now if you are a foreigner, you can get the best people, but you'll pay slightly less than you would back home, wherever home is, because you're a foreigner, you're not local to there. But if you are someone that has lived in multiple places, there is a huge arbitrage to be done. No, seriously, just because you are essentially a local, it's not outsourcing. So because you are local, you are hiring. Of course, you're going to pay more. And like even the people that we pay in Croatia, they don't have Croatian salaries. No one has a Croatian salary, to be clear. But there is a discount compared to someone that lives in San Francisco. But the reason that you're doing it is not necessarily the discount. And it's not about the money specifically. It is because in, let's say, a place like San Francisco, everyone is either trying to be create a startup, or they're trying to work at the hottest startup. And it's much harder to be the hottest startup in SF than it is to be in whatever other country in the world. And because of that, you can get the highest caliber of employees and or engineers in these other places because you are the hottest. You're the big fish in the small pond.
That's
right? Obviously, you want to be the big fish in the big pond as well, and that doesn't stop you to get there, but it does certainly help you, especially at the beginning in this world. We talked about this earlier as well, where on one side, people are saying hire less people, but we're also seeing the biggest salaries for engineers that we've ever seen at the same time.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, let's talk a little bit more about this because, we're talking a lot about team building here. I think, your company, as you mentioned before, is positioned in the AI space. Now, if anybody that's been paying attention to the news saw, for example, somebody try to get hired for $1 billion pay package and multiple people making tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. So I guess I'll ask the obvious question, which is, how are you finding employees, in this environment? Like, how are you approaching team building, and what are these people doing that they're approaching team building with in that way?
I mean, it all depends on your stage and where you're at, right? So we're 15 people, 15, right? So we're still pretty small. And at the stage that we're at, and I mean, the founder of Lovable said this yesterday or today, we mentioned this on a different podcast, where even if he had the funds to hire these people, they probably wouldn't give them the return of investment, just because the environment in which Lovable at their scale operates is not the same scale as Meta, right? Nor is Lovable the scale that we're at. Like, everyone is at a different scale. So I think you really do have to hire for the scale that you are at. And so finding people, one, obviously we have a bunch of people in Croatia because we're there, but we're also hiring people in the US. The way you do hire them, of course, the way you get attention is the same way you get customers. And I feel it's all the same, is if you are interesting to customers, then you're interesting to investors, then you're interesting to employees. It sort of all goes together. You're not going to get, you can get lucky on either of them, but if you get the customer right, then all of these things sort of fall in line, and it's much easier to get these people. Now, to get the interest of people. Now, who do you end up hiring and why do you hire them is a different story, but I believe that the number one to focus for your company, although it's obvious but not obvious at the same time, is can you focus on the customer? Then all of these other things sort of fall into line.
Yeah.
We'll be back to the episode in a second, but first, I'd like to acknowledge the team behind the channel, This.Labs. We're seeing 3x to 5x productivity improvements with our teams and clients using tools like Cursor, Claude Code, and GitHub Copilot. We help teams adopt these technologies and get max value out of them through strategic partnerships, trainings, and other software engineering services. Check us out at ai.this.co. Thanks, now back to the video.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I think sometimes about, people might think of, well, why can't I make a team of all-stars, right? If I had the money, and sometimes with VC, that can happen, right? Especially in the AI space, right? We might have near infinite money, so we go hire the absolute best. That's like, people think about that. They think about like the 92 dream team, right? This team that just is so much more talented than anybody they will ever go up against. They're just clowning on everybody. But they maybe don't think about the fact that many of the progressive Olympic teams in the NBA eventually started losing because you can't just take talented people, the most talented people in the most talented market, and produce the most talented team, because everybody comes with their own system. Like, is that kind of some of the logic that you're thinking about?
I just like a caveat on there. On that team, the dream team, Croatian basketball was the only team that had a lead on the dream team for a while during the Olympics. That's it. They were the only, I think they came in second or the end. I don't know.
I love it.
Basically, I know that fact because it was in like whatever quizzes and whatnot.
But nowadays it's like the American team, again, the NBA, no country in the world, or no place in the world has a league as deep or as talented as the NBA. But yet the best American players are losing to maybe a European team or a South American team that maybe has like 2 NBA players and then like, the best local international players. And the idea is that, like, because they've drilled as a team for years, like they have a system and a program that's built up to do what they do. And, the United States had to develop something very similar to that. It could no longer be the case, just throw the most talented people out on the court and they'll just make it work. Like there is something beyond individual competence added together that makes a whole better than the sum of its parts. Like, is that...
I mean, there's a lot of things to unpack on this one, specifically, which is like the team itself, the communication of the team, and the experience of the team. And so I'll do the experience one first, where usually, if we're talking about like company building, which is slightly different than sports teams, is that most of the successful companies that started from like zero and became super successful people, all the sort of mafias from those companies, which are the cracked people that you want to hire, the ones that created that company were not quote unquote cracked at that time. They were all quote unquote unknown, right? No one knew who they were. And when you see that, when you look at that, then that means if you want to create the next new successful company, you're probably, especially at the beginning years of the company, it's not in your best interest to bring in someone that is super senior and now working at like a 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 person company. You want the net new people that want to prove themselves, right? That get there, because it's the net new ones that get you there. It's the ones that like you will sleep under the... We're talking about an engineer, which we might actually hire in a different company, that literally sleeps under his table. He sleeps under his table. Like, that person, beginning of his career, 20-ish, something years old, whatever, amazing. Like that, like some people call it weird, but that is someone that actually has the will to go out and be the next, and create the next thing. But at the same time, which is a different topic. So topic one is probably the person that you think, and we made this mistake at Daytona originally. It's like, let's get the best people, and we just looked at logos, right? What company are they working on? At what have they built? What have they whatever? And if we just add them together, then we're going to be more valuable, right? Turns out that didn't work the best. And what you're sort of alluding to is what I, to my detriment, figured out a bit later in life, is that especially as someone that has multiple companies, I've had like 4 companies, and worked at others, so many people that you've worked with for a long time. And I've actually rehired a bunch of them. And so now almost everyone in the 15-person company that we are has worked with me or my co-founder from anywhere from 4 to like 15 years. So like a really, really, really
That's
long
amazing.
time.
Yeah.
And the context between us is insane, right? And we're talking about this earlier, and this is a real life example. The example was at a company I had worked at. So I'd sold my company, it was at this large company, and it was like, okay, we need to do a meetup in New York, and no one's from New York here, right? But it's our target, and we have to do a meetup in New York. And the answer was, what does that mean? Like, where, when, who's speaking, why speaking, what's the budget, whatever. I'm like, what do you mean? Just like, do a meetup. Because in my mind, I already know what a meetup would look like. And so fast forward, Daytona now, I've hired one of the original people that worked at my conference company 10 years ago. And so he basically has a PhD in history, right? Like he has nothing to do with this from a schooling educational perspective, but he's done a bunch of events or business with events. And it was literally, we need to do 25 meetups in the next 3 months, or I forgot the number it was. The outcome of that was like a few days later, here's an Excel spreadsheet, here are the calendars, here are the cities, here are the locations, here are how many people are coming. Like it's the same prompt, like we need to do X meetups, but the outcomes is quite different. It's sort of like if you're talking to an AI agent that you just like did a large prompt versus just like get this done, right?
Yeah.
And because we've worked together, we understand each other, and the questions he will ask me back will be like, or that doesn't agree with will be like X, Y, or Z. And because we know each other so well, he doesn't hold back when he has, you know, arguments or doesn't agree with it, whatever, because we have that going for each other. And I think that is, to your point on like the basketball teams as well, is like having that communication together as a company is so much more valuable, especially when it's not an input and output organization. What I mean by input is output is like, I've worked remote in my life. I worked in office and whatnot. When you work remotely, it's quote unquote easier if it's very much input and output. It's like employee X has to do Y. They do that and they send it back to you. Done. But if you're like, and especially at smaller, you know, companies or startups, you're like brainstorming every day. You're figuring things out every day. Like shit hits the fan every day. There's always problems. And then if you're all in sync, like you can solve these things super fast and get going. And that is where I think a team that has that cohesion and can work together is much more valuable and can work faster than companies that have the quote unquote best cracked individual people working there.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that. And I'm curious if you agree with this too, then, because I'm thinking about this a little bit. And what I hear you saying is that you need these people. You need these people that, especially as a leader in an organization, that you can kind of communicate efficiently to, and then that gets unpackaged. Like you said, I love that idea of exactly like you give an AI, right? You can't give it total context. You'll have it takes too long to produce that much context. And there's all sorts of other detrimental effects that can get in there. So you want somebody that can work on that efficient, dense context, but that's small. And so, but I think, though, my point is, I don't know if you need everybody in the org to be that way. You need enough people, though, I think, spread out so that in each case where you're operating, there's at least one person or a couple people that understands that context. Because I think sometimes I play that role. I've been working with Tracy now at this stop for 7 years, but the first hire that we had at the company. And so nowadays, she'll be in a meeting, she'll get some crazy brainstorm, and she'll drop something into a channel, much like what you said, like, oh, we need to do something, a meetup in this place. And then the reply from somebody is like, what did this mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes I come in and I'm like the Tracy whisperer. And I'm like, what she meant was she was talking to somebody about this and she wants us to look into this and do this. And well, how do I do that? Well, you go and do this and then we do it this way. And you get someone to kind of do that. And if you can build that, suddenly you have this like built-in mentoring chain, and you have the people you've worked with for a while training the next set of people who will have worked with you for a while. And I like that idea. That you need just maybe enough, spread out enough, so there's not just one poor person who's overworked trying to be,
of course.
Your speaker.
And of course, this doesn't scale forever. Like you don't know unlimited. So like, imagine you're like Microsoft, and like you can't employ in Microsoft like whatever they have 200,000 people. I don't think the CEO today knows 200,000 people, right? You can't do that. But basically what I'm saying is like when you're starting, can you get as many? And obviously if you're younger, it's harder. And that's why you're probably working with like friends or acquaintances, whatever, because you have some context. So when you're conversing versus, and it's really, really hard when you take someone that has never interacted with anyone from your team and you bring them into the office, you see this. I see this every time. It's like you say something and they understand something completely different. Like they have no idea. And sometimes they even take offense. And I'm like, why are you offended? What happened? We weren't even talking. Like it has nothing to do with you at all. And it's like, we're doing this thing. And then they don't have all that context built up to be able to do this thing. So yes, obviously, as you bring more people in, other people will get there. And I found that a way some people do bring this in is I've talked to like, friends and peers, especially again, when you're smaller, everyone, we call them in our company janitor. Everyone's a janitor. Like everyone does everything. Of course, you have your set of tasks that you inherently have to do, but anything outside of that task that is not done, like there's a high probability that you'll have to do it or I'll have to do it. Like someone will do it. There's no other person. You're not in a corporation. There's no someone else taking care of it. Like among us here, like someone is going to have to solve this thing. But what I found is, especially at this stage, shadowing is actually the best way for someone to pick up on cues. And I will literally, when working remote, it was really hard to do that. I tried to do like daily calls for like an hour and walk through their things. In person, it's much easier. We're literally just like sit beside me and do your thing and I do my thing. And then hopefully they just start picking up on cues as you are on calls, as you interact with other people, as you talk about these things. They start picking up on what the context is because you want to pick up that context. You want them to pick up the context as soon as they can. And also what I think is important is it's not just your context as employer, employee. It is also the context of the group and how you see the world, because the way you operate in the world, and this is now more go to market than perhaps like technical building, but the way we as Daytona go to market is because we see the world in a certain way. And we believe that if we do X, the reaction to the world is Y, right? That's anyone has their own, even if they don't understand it, they have their own vision of the world. And you want your entire team to at least understand your vision of the world, if not agree. Like they don't necessarily have to agree, but they have to understand. And we've had this example, which I mentioned earlier, where one of our team members was like, he came up to me and is like, I really don't understand why when you do this thing ends up happening. It is exactly like you say it does. In my belief system of the world, this should not happen. But you've done it 5 times. And I believe it, like I just believe it's going to happen, but I don't understand it, right? And it's great that you can have a conversation with someone like that. And they're like, I still don't understand why it happens, but I know that if we do this thing and you said it happens, it will happen, which means that at least they don't have the same belief system of the world completely, which is totally fine, but they understand what we see as a company as the world, and they respect that task because it ends up being true.
Yeah, I love when you get that place, as somebody looks up to a leader, and and sometimes I'm like, yeah, that would never work for me, but somehow it works for her, and I know it does. So yeah, when she wants to do that, I say let's do it because it works for her. I would never if it was up to me, but yeah, it works for her somehow. Yeah, absolutely. Well, like, what's funny is that you said that this may not scale, but I agree with you that like at a startup, certainly the people you need to bring in with you, your lieutenants, I guess as you may call them, is like that's got to be a much bigger percentage of the whole. Maybe it's the entire whole at the very beginning, right? And then it gradually will become less and less. But I would imagine this scales to any sized corporation in the sense of, yeah, okay, the CEO is not bringing in every worker for the entire org, but they're going to bring in their lieutenants to be near the top because that's going to be the best people. Each of those lieutenants might bring in their own lieutenants who, that works well with them. And then it can like kind of trickle through an organization. I think what I'm taking from this, and I'm curious, how you would generalize this, is I think your experience, you had the experience building conferences. You've had this experience working in different companies and building teams and working with people and caring enough about them that these people will pick up the phone when you call them back, 10 years later, 5 years later, whatever it is. I think what I hear is leaders have to be working on that network. Obviously, it starts with making sure that the people you're working with and that work for you want to work for you again or work with you again. But some of that also is like being out there and meeting people, whether that be, like you said, building a conference. I'm sure, I don't know if any of the people working with you now were people that were helping you with the conference, but that's a ton of volunteers. It's a ton of people you'll meet along the way, a ton of relationships you'll build. And a ton of really tough work that has to get done on deadlines. So, I'm sure some of those people have learned how you work and you've learned how they work under pressure. And what an amazing network to have built from that. If you don't cultivate that over your career, you could end up 10, 15 years down the road. And suddenly the list of people that who you would call is not an impressive company worth starting. Like, if you're going to have experience, make the experience work for you at least. Would this be a piece of advice you think you would give?
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I was thinking about something else while you're saying that. And so growing up, like, in a not high-end social economic class, so not knowing a lot of people, did not go to an Ivy League school, did not, was not ex-Microsoft, like, whatever, had none of those. Building a conference company actually helped out with a lot of that. To be fair, similar to what you're saying, it's not just the volunteers, but also the speakers, the sponsors. Like, everyone is now part of the network. And now, like, I have angel investors that were speakers, or sponsors that are now customers, or volunteers that are employees or whatnot. And so it does do that. And when I think about other founders, when you look back enough, a lot of them did do events at some point in time, like parties, events in university, high school, whatnot. And I'd actually I'm digressing a bit, but I kind of encourage people that don't, like, everyone can do it and not, by the way, I had stage fright. I did not know how to speak on stage. I had not organized anything bigger than a birthday party for 10 people. Like, I had no idea how to do these things. Like, you learn as you go. But it does help you build out this huge network. And network is, like, super important. And if you don't come from a background where these networks already exist, and I know a lot of people do, and that's great for you to have that. If you don't, it does help you out in your career later on to do these things. So I'm just like dropping this as a small note. Like, literally, if you're trying to get into any type of industry, actually, like, doing events around that, it doesn't have to be obviously a 4,000 persons conference. It helps you so much. Like, even just getting a job, if you're not planning to create a company, it helps you so much, because what you mentioned there was, like, pressure. The amount of pressure creating an event is something does not exist anywhere else. And I talked to other conference organizers. I think that the conference, it's in top 10 most stressful jobs in the world. Like, firefighter is is slightly above conference organizer, which is insane. But the reason it's there is because, unlike other things, everything happens in the window of those 8 hours, 10 hours, 24 hours, whatever. So people will bail, airplanes won't land, lunches won't arrive. Like, all this happens in real time. There's no patches, there's no fixes, you could refund, but there's no way to solve that. And I've seen time and time again, people, like, break under pressures of these conferences, either ours or other people's. And so it teaches you a lot of things. And we went in a different direction for this conversation, but it's just, like, so interesting. And I would actually suggest to anyone just making it in the world that's starting now, that says, like, oh, I have no connections, I have nobody, start cold emailing everyone and put something together. It doesn't matter what it is. I would 100% recommend that.
But the thing is, what's fascinating though is, and the way I want to tie it back, as the kids would say, I don't know if I'm cooking or I'm a little cooked on this one, but we started off by talking about, like, one of the mistakes that especially founders will make, or smaller companies, is that they'll just go out and try to hire the best. I mean, I think that might be even a universal thing, right? I mean, some people have called that fit. Generally, if it's a bigger company, you're looking for culture fit. I mean, a smaller company might be looking, like you said, context fit with the leader. But, I wonder if this advice is generalizable in the sense of, if as a leader, your primary focus is purely on the stats, purely on the metrics, purely on the success of the company. Now, granted, that's first and foremost, the company has to be successful. But if you do that at the cost of burning out your people and making it so that they never want to work with you before, it feels like you've squandered something essential to your future success. Like, there's, like, this short-term gain versus long-term success. And so the same type of mentality that'll lead you to just go out there and just pay as much as you can to get the best people and hope that'll create a better whole would lead someone possibly to also think, listen, I just got to perform. If I perform, then I'm going to get that opportunity to be the leader at the next company. Well, then you go and you're the leader at the next company, but nobody knows how to follow you. And nobody that followed you before wants to follow you again. That just feels like then you'll just go from failed venture to failed venture to failed venture, constantly figuring out, complaining, why can no one understand what I'm trying to say? I've been successful before. Why can nobody get this? And it just seems like one of the things you need to be cultivating is that list of people that understand your context, because that's the way that you scale your influence, is to just have more and more people underneath you that kind of get how it works, so that you can communicate more and more efficiently with a bigger and bigger organization, no matter how new it is. Like, can we generalize that beyond just hiring people? Don't take it too far. Like, do you agree with that?
I agree with that, and I think it all sort of compounds. At least for us in the company, like all that stuff compounds, because you don't exist in a vacuum. Obviously, like it is depending on what industry. Like it feels when you're an outsider to any industry, like it's so large, but every industry is really, really small. Like if we're talking about like tech industry is super small. Like if you hang out at enough events in San Francisco in the next year and go to like 5 conferences, I guarantee you're 1 degree away from everyone. 1 degree. If not, no, like, everyone is super small. And so I think that first to unpack that, if you can keep bringing in people that have worked with you, I think that's like a great sign. Like I say that for myself because we've brought these people in, even though there's a caveat where I've seen investors that we've talked to is like, oh, why don't you hire from wherever? And I'm assuming it's whatever like school, city, company that they had worked at, because they understand that those people, so they don't value the people that we have on board. And I think that is something that is to their detriment, and they should not look at it through their lens, but we're all people. But rather just like in the leaders of the companies that they're investing in, are they able to bring these people back? Because if they're able to bring these people back, it means that they're doing something right, irregardless of did the company succeed or not succeed. Because right. The reason the company succeeds or not succeeds can be multiple factors. It could be time, it could be market, it could be that person is a founder. Like it can be, but that's just like only one of the probabilities why whatever happened before, assuming that it failed, right? And even if the interesting fact here is, if the companies weren't like breakout successes, I think bringing the people on board, if you could remove the execution risk of the founder, is probably the best signal of all, because you'll always, I'd assume, respect a leader that has been on the winning team. It's just like you've always won together.
That's
so
right.
You just keep winning together. And if you're not won together and they still want to work with you, then there's something else that's really well. There's exceptions to the rule where you could just be like a good buddy and they like to hang out with you and then they get a salary for not doing anything. But that's the one risk you have to like remove there. But all of the risks, I would assume that is a founder or team member or team in general that goes beyond most average ones. So I got off track from your question, but where all these things land, and it's not exactly the same, but right now, our company, Daytona, we've gotten to the point, so the company's been around for 2 years, but the product that we've launched has been around for 3.5 months. That's it, 3.5 months. We have people from like YC and Techstars and whatnot, all reaching out. They already know us. I have DM'd so many people on Twitter and they're like, oh, you guys are awesome. I'm like, how do you know who we are? Like, I'm shocked. Like, how do you know where you are? And one of the reasons is the team that we have put together has hung out and been at other events. If I haven't met them, they've met someone of mine. And because we have a good communication, then they have a great interaction with this person, probably because we also have great interactions. Then they already understand that we are at a higher level or a higher quality or a higher bar, just because you keep these people together. And the way they talk about the founders, the team, the company is quite different, because it's more, I don't want to use the word family because I don't think that's correct, but there's surely a deeper connection. And I think that riffs off not just on hiring people and getting mother, but just like the entire brand of your company echoes out of that.
Yeah, it's funny because you talked about like, winning and losing. If you lose and people still follow you, that's kind of an interesting situation. And you're right that it could be because you're so easy as a leader that people just seeking their free lunch. But I think we've all been on teams where we're standing around looking at each other like, this is failing, right? Like there's rudderless leadership at the top. It's chaos every day. Like if this succeeds, we will have not earned it. It will just have been a thing that occurred, right? And I think, the other way around, we could be a team that just believes in each other. We're trying hard. We're achieving. We're punching above our belts. We have a shot at winning, and we fall a little bit short. I'll follow that leader again, because a different situation, a better starting position, maybe, with more experience, boom, we've got this that way. And I think, winning and losing is multivariate, but whether or not your team feels like they maximize their potential by working with you, I think that is in your control. And people will follow leaders, win or lose, if they felt like that leader maximized them.
I think that's interesting. There's a book I read, and I actually bought it for a bunch of people for Christmas a few years ago. It's called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. It's like a poker player.
Oh, yeah.
Have you read the book?
Yeah.
And so it's like the first chapter is whatever it was. I forgot, it was a football game, whatever it was, the first chapter. And the coach did this play, and he lost. And everyone hated him because he lost. But he did the right call, because if you look at the stats, doing that play in that scenario yielded the highest probability of success, yet he failed. And then what she calls is resulting. People, if he did the other play, which had a lower probability, and he won, they would say, oh, you're a friggin' genius. Yeah. He wasn't a genius. He did the right thing, right? He did the right thing. If you look at the probability, he did the right thing. He ended up failing. So the result was a fail. And then we always look at those things versus the success. And that's similar to what you're saying right now. Whereas if you're inside of it, you understand if you guys are making the best calls in the market that you're in, right? And then the market tanks, whatever, things change, and then you don't make it. But you knew as a team that you were doing the highest probabilities, the things that gave the highest probabilities of success.
Great. Well, hey, very quickly, we're right at the end here. Let people know where they can find you online or Daytona online if they want to connect with you or check out the things that you guys got going on.
Sure. So Daytona.io is the website. GitHub.com/Daytona.io. All the socials are Daytona.io. First name, last name for me on all the socials. So Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever, everyone can find me. Also in our Slack of Daytona, the public one, everyone that sends out a message, I reply, or Twitter, everywhere. So I'm one of those that tries to reply in that first 5 minutes. So happy to chat if anyone has anything to talk about.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll put links to everything in the show notes, so you didn't have to rewind and memorize all that. You can just click the links down below. But thanks so much, Ivan, for being here. That's going to be it for us today. Thanks for being our guest. Thanks to each of you for listening. We hope to see you all next time. As we round out, we would just like to thank today's sponsor, This.Labs, one last time, who would like me to remind you that This. Is dedicated to guiding companies through their modernization and AI transformation journeys. This.Labs is a tech consultancy that specializes in amplifying your technical capabilities, whether it's expanding your dev team with seasoned professionals or streamlining your project's journey from ideation to deployment. We work with clients like Google, Microsoft, PayPal, and more. Check us out at this.co. One more time, that's THISDOT.co. Thanks, everybody. See you all next time.